Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a good weekend. Well, over the weekend, it appears that the Browns have decided on their offensive coordinator. No official announcement yet, but everybody, multiple sources saying that the Browns will be hiring Ken Dorsey as their offensive coordinator. That one from Scott Petrak, so let's welcome in Scott Petrak. He is Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram as well as BrownsZone.com. And Scott, we were talking, it's not a sexy pick, but there were a lot of teams that were looking for offensive coordinators, and Dorsey has had some success as an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach.
Yeah, he certainly has. He's got familiarity here, right, after being quarterback here in the, late aughts. 0-3 as a starter. I think it was 2008. And I like, I kind of like his pedigree. Worked with Cam Newton when Cam Newton was the MVP of the league and went 15-1 and took the Panthers to the Super Bowl. Had a lot of success with Josh Allen and the Josh Allen progression, right, from a raw guy until, to the MVP candidate he's become as a quarterback's coach and then as a coordinator last year. Buffalo had a lot of success with Dorsey calling the plays and the coordinator in 2022. Obviously, it didn't end well, but I think there's reasons to have some optimism. And like we talked about, so much more goes into it than just you can put on paper, right? Oh, he's got this resume. It's, can he run meetings? Can he get along with the rest of the staff? How does he fit with Kevin Stefanski? How is he in the quarterback room with those guys? Do they appreciate him? So we're not going to know any of that, but I think Ken Dorsey is just as good as about anybody that the Browns had on their list.
All right, so to your point about the success that he had, Mina Kimes, ESPN, tweets this out. Bills offense through week 10 under Ken Dorsey. Third in the NFL in DVOA, first in success rate, third in EPA per play, fourth in quarterback QBR, quarterback rating, third in yards per play, second and third down conversion percentage, third in red zone efficiency. So all really good stats. Obviously, they look, fans are looking at it and say, well, they were 5-5. They ended up going on a run. The offense improved. There, as you said, there's a number of things that go into it. The offense was pretty good with them. They just kept turning the ball over.
Yeah, and Josh Allen turned the ball over. I think he had a league-high 11 interceptions at the time of Dorsey's firing. And, is all that on the coordinator? No. Is the coordinator responsible for some of it? Maybe. The whole team had a bunch of turnovers. The whole offense had a bunch of turnovers. They did go through a stretch where they hadn't scored over 26 points, and it had been the longest stretch in like 5 seasons. So things are going sideways in Buffalo, right? But it wasn't just about Ken Dorsey. There were grumblings about head coach Sean McDermott, right? There are a lot of issues there. But sometimes you're just looking to make a change and try to get a spark. And that's the way McDermott went. But I don't know if that's necessarily an indictment on the bigger picture of Ken Dorsey.
Yeah, and at the time of the firing, Josh Allen, the quarterback, had said that, if they played up to their potential, it wouldn't have come to that. Allen came out and said that. Take a listen to what he said when Ken Dorsey was named the offensive coordinator. That was August 11th, 2022.
He's a fiery guy. I don't know if you guys have seen him on the sideline yet in practice. But again, talk about a guy that doesn't want to lose, that hates losing. He absolutely hates it, and that's why he was 38-2 in college. He never lets me forget it. 38-2. Oh yeah. I always try to jab at him, like, Coach, what were you, 36-4? He's like, 38-2. Anyways, he loves competing, and I've heard stories about him in the gym over there playing basketball with some of the other coaches, and the stories aren't too delight. He's a fiery guy, and I love to have that from my offensive coordinator.
And again, that gives you some insight into what kind of coach he is, how a player views Ken Dorsey as a coach. 38-2 is at Miami of Florida. It's one of the best records for a college quarterback ever.
Yeah, I think he won a national championship down there. Like I said, when you're around him when he was a player, you could tell he was a smart guy. I mean, he didn't throw it well enough. I mean, that's why he didn't have any success. Wasn't a long-term starter in the league. He just didn't have the arm talent that you needed, the arm strength. But he was obviously smart being around him, knew how to get the ball in his playmakers' hands in college, right? He was one of those great college quarterbacks that couldn't quite make the transition. Those guys tend to make really good coaches. And, first of all, Brian Daboll, who was here with the Browns as coordinator, goes on to coach at Alabama, goes on to be coordinator at Buffalo. And he hires Ken Dorsey, right? He helps that transition as quarterback coach. Then he wanted to have Dorsey follow him to New York when he got the head coaching job with the Giants, but the Bills fought to keep Dorsey. So that shows he was wanted. I respect Brian Daboll a lot. The fact that he likes Ken Dorsey, I think, means something. And then Josh Allen talking about the passion. I mean, anybody who's seen Dorsey's reaction when they lost that game to Miami in 2022, where he slams the headset, kind of repeatedly slams the tablet on the desk in the press box in the coach's booth, you can tell how seriously he takes winning and losing. And for all the people that are upset when Kevin Stefanski keeps it even keel, you would think this would be a nice kind of balance.
Yeah, it's similar to the type of balance they got with Jim Schwartz. So you don't want necessarily the exact demeanor from all of the coaches. As you could imagine, fans want to talk about this. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
Good morning, gentlemen. This is Jim from Rochester, New York. Mr. Berry and Mr. Stefanski, I hope this is their last year coming up. I don't think they're going to get rid of him. I hired Dorsey as another scapegoat. He ain't going to call the plays. Mr. Stefanski is, and when things go wrong, he'll blame him again. Tell Mr. Stefanski, stop with the analytics. You get as many points as you can, where you can, and how you can. The only good point about the year has been our defense, and unfortunately, when we played in Houston, that didn't show up either. But that's the end of the season, another disappointment. But at any rate, keep Mr. Stefanski and Mr. Berry, because with them, we go nowhere. You guys have a great, great rest of the winter and early summer, and I'll talk to you after that. Take care, y'all. Bye now.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scapegoat, I don't get the idea that it's a scapegoat. And if you're going to credit Jim Schwartz for the defense, Kevin Stefanski hired him. I mean, there's a little bit of a disconnect with that.
Yeah, there's a few issues there. I mean, I appreciate the caller has me thinking about summer a little bit there. But, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry aren't going anywhere. In fact, I expect them to get long-term contract extensions relatively soon, right? So they're not going to go anywhere. I think the caller's got to get used to that. I don't know how you look at the job Stefanski did as a head coach and as a play caller this season, having to start 5 different quarterbacks, 4 of them win games for you, and you win 11 games. Like, I just don't understand how people can look at that and not be – I mean, you can say you're not satisfied because you don't go to the Super Bowl. That's fine. But I don't know how you don't appreciate that, how you're not at some level happy with that, happy with the talent that Andrew Berry brought in to win 11 games, right? Like, it does feel like you said a disconnect there. I don't think Kevin Stefanski used Alex Van Pelt as a scapegoat. He could have easily brought Van Pelt back and nobody would have said anything. Nobody would have given it a second thought. But he's trying to take this team to the next level. And another thing we should probably mention with Dorsey is he worked with Josh Allen. He worked with Cam Newton. Those guys like to run the ball at quarterback. Different styles, much bigger bodies than Deshaun Watson. Power runners. But I think there is a crossover there. And that Deshaun Watson uses the run threat in his game, is a runner at some points. And the Browns are trying to figure out the best way to maximize Deshaun Watson's skill set. And having a quarterback that had success with Cam Newton and Josh Allen, to me, that makes sense.
Yeah, the skill sets they're not the same, but there's some common threads there. All right, we'll get back to the offensive coordinator in a minute. Browns also reportedly made another move on the coaching staff. Jacques Cesare, defensive line coach, was Houston's defensive line coach. Browns also could potentially be keeping the man who is currently the defensive line coach, Ben Bloom. Mary Kay Cabot tweeting out he may remain with the team as a run game coordinator. So, again, to your point, this is another instance of they're trying to kind of find different voices to to do the things that they're looking to do in that coaching staff.
Yeah, and trying to take everything to the next level, right? Like Ben Bloom, like the defensive line was good this year. I mean, Myles Garrett might be Defensive Player of the Year. Zadarius Smith didn't have a ton of sacks, but came on late and had some sacks. They were 6th in the league, I think, in total sacks. Dalvin Tomlinson, I thought, played well. Jordan Elliott had his best year. Alex Wright had his best year. Like, there were positives there. Now, was it good enough? The Browns obviously said no. And you can point out reasons for that, right? Maybe Smith should have had more sacks. Maybe as a group you want to be have the most sacks in the league. Myles Garrett, at the end of the year, we know he didn't have sacks. Again, it's not all about sacks. But they decided to make a change there to try to get even more out of this group. What's interesting to me is, Cesar doesn't have a background with Jim Schwartz. And I thought maybe Schwartz would bring in somebody he had more experience with, right? And he didn't really do that with, if you look through the staff, right? He kept Jason Tarver. He hired Ephraim Banda, but I don't know if they had a background. This is not Jim Schwartz just bringing a bunch of guys he used to work with. And you see the same thing with this hire. Played in the league. I think guys like that from their coaches had success with Will Anderson Jr. and Jonathan Gennard. But again, the Texans didn't keep him, right? I mean, we're talking about the Texans, what a great year they had, what a turnaround. They didn't renew his contract. So, I think it's just about fits and the people, and we'll see if this guy fits well.
Well, you mentioned Grenard, so take a look at this. This is Grenard under Cesar and not. So 25 games before Cesar's tenure in Houston, so that would be 20 and 21. 33 pressures, 9 sacks, 24 stops. 23 games under Cesar, 22 and 23. 59 pressures, 14 sacks, and 46 stops. So again, does that mean success? No, but it shows that he helped develop a guy who's considered an elite pass rusher.
Yeah, and, I think the Texans I know they were top 10. I'm losing the numbers off the top of my head, but against the run, they were top 10, so it's not just the end. They had good guys in the middle. Sheldon Rankins is one of their tackles. I think they were 2nd in the league in yards per rush. It was under 100 yards per game they allowed, against the run. We mentioned their sack pressure. So, yeah, I mean, those are things you look at and go, okay, this guy has to have something to him, right? And they're a playoff team. Now, maybe it's as simple as D'Amico Ryans kept him for a year. He was under contract. Now he's not. D'Amico's a new coach. Maybe he wants to bring in his own guys, and the Browns, saw this as an opportunity to upgrade. But, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things to like just looking at this 2023 Texans team.
Scott Petrak from brownzone.com and the Elyria Chronicle-Telegraph and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out on the side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Also talk a little bit more about Ken Dorsey.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino. A night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
To all the Browns fans that have an issue with this hire of Ken Dorsey, just 2 years ago, everybody in the NFL, even in the college ranks, were trying to get him because of what he did with Josh Allen. And everybody was using that whole Ken Dorsey was fired, he was let go, the offense stunk, but he was really a scapegoat. His offense ranked top 5 through 10 weeks, and the Bills were like, that's not good enough. And I'm not trying to give an excuse on why Dorsey was fired, but this is a really, really big hire. So we need to give this time, and we need to see in the season how this goes, because we don't know yet.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, you're not going to know until probably middle to end of next year how this goes, because it's going to take time. You would assume there's going to be some changes to the offense to try to maximize Deshaun Watson. That would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some from 2022 to 2023. I think we'll see more heading into 2024. We'll have to see how much the Browns run Deshaun Watson, right, coming off those shoulder injuries. Do they take that out of his game? Are there less quarterback designed runs? Is it more just off-schedule plays? We'll have to see how that develops. But, I think you'll see a lot of shotgun and a lot of the RPOs that we started to see this year. So, to me, it's just going to be a progression. I think that's one of the reasons Kevin Stefanski made that change. Get fresh voice, you get some fresh ideas. It's the Cam Newton, it's the Josh Allen. Josh Allen, if I'm right, is a lot in the shotgun. So I think there are some overlap, and it's just a matter of Kevin Stefanski looking for any opportunity to maximize what Deshaun Watson does, expand his playbook, expand his knowledge, and try to get better.
So let's take a look at this. This is from when Dorsey was hired with the Bills. So spent 2013 to 2017 with the Panthers as their quarterback coach. Oversaw the development of Cam Newton for his tenure with the Panthers. Buffalo head coach Sean McDermott, general manager Brandon Beane were also with Carolina during most of that period. So they knew Dorsey from that time. Dorsey left Carolina when Norv Turner was hired as his offensive coordinator before 2018. So when Dorsey was let go, Cam Newton praised him upon his departure and accepting the new job. Credit Ken Dorsey with a lot of my success, Newton in a statement when he left. And again, players aren't necessarily, they're not going to throw guys under the bus, but they're not going to say those kind of things unless they truly feel them.
Yeah, Ken Dorsey would not have been the coordinator if Josh Allen didn't want him, right? Between 21 and 22 when Brian Daboll leaves. If Josh Allen weren't comfortable with Dorsey taking on that role, Dorsey would not have been hired. I believe that. So Josh Allen liked him. I sure believe Cam Newton liked him. That's what you want. You want your quarterback coach / coordinator to get along with your quarterback, right? It doesn't have to be, you don't want to be best buddies, but you want there to be a mutual respect, the ability to work together. They spend hours upon hours together, and I think the endorsements of those two guys, I think that is meaningful.
All right, so the guy that Dorsey will replace, Alex Van Pelt, going to get an interview in Tampa to be the Bucs offensive coordinator. Still in play in Las Vegas for the Raiders' OC job as well. So could be reunited with Baker Mayfield if he gets that Buccaneers offensive coordinator position. And again, everybody's looking at Alex Van Pelt and saying Kevin Stefanski made him a scapegoat. He didn't say he hadn't said anything, but you're not going to hear him say anything other than fresh set of eyes. We're trying to get a different perspective. That's all they're looking for.
Yep. And, he offered Van Pelt a different job on staff, and Van Pelt turned it down. I think the whole time, Van Pelt was looking to be a play caller somewhere, and that opportunity wasn't going to come with the Browns. So I think it probably worked. When you look back on it, I think you might be able to say it worked out for both sides, right? That Van Pelt got a chance to go be a play caller, assuming he gets one of these jobs. The reunion with Baker would be interesting. I think Baker really got along with Van Pelt in Cleveland. I think Baker's would be in Van Pelt's corner in Tampa Bay, like hire him. Now, the issue there is Baker Mayfield's a free agent to be. We don't know if he's coming back, but if that's the plan, if the Buccaneers are planning to keep Baker and give him some kind of, multi-year contract, I think it would help him to have Van Pelt. You don't have then to bring in another offensive system, right? We talk about all these coaches that Baker's had to go through, which has not helped his development. A familiar guy, a familiar system that if Van Pelt brought a similar system to Cleveland, I think that would be good for Baker, and I think Baker would accept that, and not only accept it, would welcome that.
All right, this from Dog Pound Daily. 3 first-year Browns who didn't earn a second season. Number 3, they say James Prochet, wide receiver, kick returner. Number 2, they go with Marquise Goodwin. Wide receiver was injured a lot. Number 1, P.J. Walker. Scott, Goodwin's an interesting one. If you bring him back on a one-year thing, he was kind of banged up, and and had some serious issues. Prochet, I kind of thought he's been one of the better punt returners in particular that we've had in a while.
Yeah, I thought Prochet was fine as a punt returner. He had the one muff. I forget even who that was against. But overall, he did a good job catching the ball. He got upfield. You know, he was better than DPJ was this year, certainly in the punt return game. You know, if you brought him back and, you know, gave him a shot, I don't think that's the end of the world. You know, they're not going to guarantee him anything, but he could be in that competition next training camp, certainly. Goodwin, he was such a disappointment. There were high expectations. You saw him in the spring, and he was making plays and catching deep balls from Watson. You know, then it's not his fault. He has the blood clots that sidelined him for all the training camp. I'm sure that affected him when we get to the season. A couple of shots early that Watson missed him on. It just felt like he never got into any kind of rhythm. Then he gets the concussion against Arizona, misses some time. So just didn't have the impact. He can still run, right? Not the biggest guy in the world. He can still run. I kind of feel like it's a one-year experiment, but you're right. If they wanted to bring him back and see if he stuck next year's at speed threat, okay.
All right, before we go to break, this from Sports Illustrated. Can the Browns afford to bring back Zadarius Smith? And they say, according to Spotrac, Chase Young's market value, $13.6 million per year going into his age 32 season. Smith probably shouldn't expect to reach that despite reduced sack numbers. Smith proved he can be an effective player. That alone should still net him a double-digit average annual value this offseason. It's going to depend on how many contracts he gets, free agent looks that are multi-year. I could see somebody going crazy because everybody's looking for edge rushers. But if it's in that $10, $11 million range, I would assume the Browns try to get him back for maybe 2 years.
It'll be interesting. I feel like there's a couple things in play here. Number one, you know, they have always had those short-term guys, opposite Myles Garrett, right? It was Olivier Vernon for a while. Then it was Jadeveon Clowney for a couple of years. Both guys getting paid right around that $10 million, right? Then they trade for Smith, and they pay him for the 1 year. So they want to have that proven guy opposite Garrett, and they're willing to pay. Now, I don't think they're going to pay a guy $15 million, but will they pay 10 or 12? That's what their history shows, and they really value that position and the guy opposite Myles Garrett for all kinds of reasons, right? You need pass rush, you need to take some pressure off Myles, all of that. Now, could they? I'm sure they'll look to see if they can upgrade over Smith, but I don't think they were unhappy with what Smith did. I think they think his production was better than the sack numbers that he showed. But now I kind of feel like he's in that Jadeveon Clowney thing now where he's not going to get a huge deal, right? That he's almost past that, and now he's a 1 year, 2 year deal, like you mentioned. So I wouldn't be stunned if they brought him back. I'll also be stunned if they said, hey, you know, they could let him go and maybe get a guy a little cheaper that fills that role. And the other element is you have Owusu-Koramoah, who you spent pretty good money on in free agency last year. It's the first guy you signed in free agency. Now, maybe they think he's just the number 3 guy, and then you got to go get a number 2. You also have Alex Wright, who came on strong at the end of the year. Now, he's not your go-get-the-pass rusher, I don't think, a double-digit sack guy. Although, I think he finished with 5 sacks. He had a run of sacks at the end. He's a big body. You can play him inside. So I think they need another guy there, a fourth end. But I'm not convinced that they'll pay the $10 million because they have 2 other guys that they like in some roles, right? So I think that could be a fluid situation.
Yeah, that's fair. And those are all things that get sorted out based on where you allocate money for running back, wide receiver, the other areas that you're trying to upgrade. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take another timeout, other side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Who was the top guy that improved the most during 2023 for the Browns? We'll talk about that. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Try C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Just saw that the Browns hired Ken Dorsey. So you go from Alex Van Pelt to a guy who was fired midway through the season because his offense was so stagnant. He couldn't make it happen. He had Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. They had a bunch of great players, and he couldn't get it going. But Cleveland brings him in like he's the answer. Horrible hire. Couldn't get more Cleveland than hiring somebody who was fired for underperforming with his team. But that's Cleveland for you. Hire somebody so Stefanski doesn't have to give up play calling. He couldn't make it work with Josh Allen, and we're supposed to believe he's going to help with Deshaun Watson. Trash hire. Fans aren't happy about this.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, again, I don't think you can say that. We've showed what he has done in other places, but you're fighting perception. Guys get let go in the NFL for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I think it's unfair to say he couldn't make it work with Josh Allen. I think they made it work for a while. We talked about Alex Van Pelt. He just got quote-unquote fired and couldn't find another job. Brian Johnson of the Eagles got fired, could find another job, right? The Chargers didn't keep Kellen Moore, and he found a job with the Eagles. And I know there's a coaching change there, but he also left the Cowboys a year before and found a job with the Chargers, right? I saw some stat, the turnover in offensive coordinator, I think it's worse than the turnover among head coaches. Mm-hmm. So just because a guy leaves or gets fired doesn't mean he can't coach. And the other part of this is, the reaction, obviously, the calls that you're getting, is strong against Ken Dorsey. And I would say, well, he probably isn't going to call the plays. So his impact, I'm not saying it's minimal because that's an important position, but it's not the same as just a defensive coach turning the offense over to a new coordinator. Kevin Stefanski, whether or not he calls plays, is going to have a huge impact on this offense. And, if you don't like that as a fan, then that's one thing, but it's not going to be like Ken Dorsey comes in here and it's all Ken Dorsey. It's going to be a lot of Kevin Stefanski, which may or may not make people feel better, but I do think it lessens the importance of the Dorsey hire.
The other thing is offensive coordinator, guys that don't call plays still have an input in the game plan and how you structure an offense. So they're trying to get a fresh set of ideas that they can incorporate into the offense for next season.
Yeah, I read a real interesting, one of my readers told me about this story in The Ringer, and it was after Dorsey got fired, and it was talking about how it's about so much more than play call, and it's about setting the game plan during the week. It's working with your other coaches. It's working with the players to prepare them for the game. So it does go beyond that, and everybody has a part. I mean, Bill Callahan is a huge part of the run game on Sundays. He's a huge part of the pass protection game. Everybody's involved in it. Obviously, the coordinator has more say. He talks to the media more often, all those things. But it is a group project, and Ken Dorsey, is being hired to add something different to that group.
All right, this from Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. Most improved player for every NFL team for the Browns. They go with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, 2023 grade, 65.5. 2022 is 65.5. 2023 is 75.2. Especially good rushing the passer, ranking third among linebackers in pass rushing grade, 87.2. The other thing about JOK, Scott, he had, I think it was the fourth most TFLs, tackles for loss, in the NFL.
Yeah, and the most from anybody not at the line of scrimmage, right? Defensive ends, edge rushers, he was the most off the ball. And he would be my vote too. And I think there's other candidates. I thought Grant Delpit made huge strides. I mentioned Alex Wright, Jerome Ford, who barely carried the ball as a rookie. Obviously turned into the number one back when Nick Chubb went down. You can say he was really improved. DeJuan Jones from training camp to the season, right? So I think they had multiple candidates on this team, but my vote would go to JOK. And I think what's exciting for the Browns is that I think he's only going to get better. right? It took him a while at Notre Dame to settle in and become the player he was and then become a second-round draft pick. I feel like he's on the same trajectory with the Browns. Has really good instincts, obviously crazy athletic, was able to stay on the field, made huge strides, and I think the more he plays, the more comfortable he gets, the better he'll be.
Yeah, I am anxious to see him in year 2 with Jim Schwartz and where that lands, without question. All right, this from the Bleacher Report. Browns' top trade assets. They go with Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb, and Jack Conklin. Cooper and Chubb provide a lot of cap relief while potentially bringing back a valuable pick. Wide receiver is a need. Dealing Cooper would free up $12.6 million cap space. Nick Chubb would net $11.8 million in cap space. I won't say there's no way. I would be stunned if they moved either. I mean, Cooper and Chubb are who you're counting on as 2 of your top 3 playmakers when Chubb gets healthy. Conklin and Chubb are coming off major injuries. They're not. There's a narrative that everybody thinks they have all these cap issues. They restructured 2 contracts, and they've got probably as much money as they want under the cap.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is right, Dave, but my first reactions are nobody's going to trade for those guys. Nobody's going to trade for those contracts when the Browns don't consider, the argument is the Browns don't want those contracts. So why would anybody else want those contracts, especially with Chubb and Conklin, the injury history that they've had, right? And Amari Cooper, to me, he's making $20 million next year. So I don't know what the cap ramifications are, but I think the team that traded for him will be hit with $20 million. So nobody's trading for Amari Cooper for $20 million unless they're going to restructure the contract, And if that's the case, and they're going to have to pay him and restructure, you're not going to get anything big back for him. I mean, the Browns traded for him a couple years ago when he was younger, and all they did was give up a 5th-round pick, right? So I don't think any of those 3 guys is going to have any value on the trade market. Now, we can talk about how the Browns have to massage those contracts to make them stick, especially with Amari Cooper. I think you have to do something. They're not going to have a $20 million cap hit again with Cooper, so I think there's going to be an extension or a restructuring something. But I'd be stunned if they traded any of those 3 guys.
Yeah, I agree with you. And think about right now, there's no other option that's, exciting as a wide receiver other than Amari Cooper. You're off a cliff to the next guy.
Right. I mean, I don't know if we're talking about today, but they're going to need to add a receiver, right? Whether they had a number 1 and Cooper slides down to number 2, or they had 2 guys and get rid of Cooper, like cut Cooper to save money. Like, I think there's a bunch of scenarios in play there. But if you just look at their roster right now, they cannot live without Amari Cooper.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at some things the Browns cannot afford to do next season. We'll also talk a little bit more about wide receivers the Browns might be interested in. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as BrownsZone.com. All right, this from Dog Pound Daily. 5 mistakes the Browns cannot afford to make in 2024. Number 5, they say re-signing injured linebackers. So Taki, Anthony Walker, Phillips, Matthew Adams. Number 4, keeping the same backup offensive tackles. Number 3, allowing all 3 defensive tackles to leave in free agency. That would be Maurice Hurst, Jordan Elliott, Shelby Harris. Number 2, banking solely on Nick Chubb to fix the run game. And number 1, overpaying Greg Newsome. Scott, the one that jumps out there is the backup offensive tackles. They actually did pretty well. I mean, you found a way to win with them.
You know, because they did win with them. They played pretty well. I don't think you're going to get – it's just hard, right? There's not enough depth to tackle to have 4 guys you love. So, yeah, is James Hudson great? No. Would you love an upgrade? Yeah, I just don't know if that's a priority. I don't know if it's even doable. There's some interesting ones on there. I don't think there's any way they expect Nick Chubb to be the main guy at running back. It's such a question mark. We know when he's going to be back. We know what the knee's going to be like. We know if he can even play. So I don't expect them to make that mistake at all. I don't think they're going to pay Greg Newsome this year. They have to decide if they're going to pick up the 5th-year option. If that's what they're talking about, okay. But I don't think he's getting any kind of extension right now. I think you need to see more from him. You know, I don't know what – oh, the D-tackle. Yeah, I agree with the D-tackles. Like, that's the one on that list that made the most sense to me. And I don't think they're going to let all the guys go. I would expect to see a combination of Maurice Hurst II and or Shelby Harris come back. I think Jordan Elliott probably leaves. He'll get a multi-year deal somewhere else. And then I think linebacker is interesting, Dave, because JOK is going to be the number 1 guy next year. And I think he'll be on the field for every snap or close to it. But they don't have anybody else in that room. Like, so I like the idea, and I was actually writing something today for my season preview, of bringing back either Walker or Taki. Experience in the system, good leaders. I think you get Walker on a 1-year deal. Taki, who wasn't hurt this year. I mean, he had the ACL a couple years ago. I think Taki might get a deal somewhere else. But I like the idea of another guy brought back next to JOK.
Yeah, and again, you know, I would expect, you know, Adams, Kanasic, somebody who's a special teams guy in addition to who can play, you know, both those guys were okay as linebackers, but their real contribution was on special teams.
Sure, and Kanasic was hurt most of the year, but Adams is a real good special teamer. You know, Tony Fields, the second's in there. You know, I don't feel like he's ready for an every down role. So now you could go find somebody else. You could draft somebody. But I kind of like the idea of some continuity next to JOK.
All right. We talked a little bit about the wide receiving core last segment, and let's dive into that a little deeper. Do you think it needs a significant upgrade? And if so, what quote-unquote type of receiver do you think helps the most?
Yeah, I think they need somebody at the top of the depth chart, whether, you know, number 1 or number 2 with Cooper, right? However you want to divide that up. I think Elijah Moore's fine as a 3. Said Tillman's a 4. David Bell fits in wherever he fits in. Like, you can make that work. And plus you have the David Njoku factor. They consider him, you know, right now they consider him the second best option in the pass game behind Cooper. And again, if your quarterback plays really well, you can make those receivers look good. But I do think you want an upgrade. Cooper's getting older. He's had a couple injuries the last couple of years, finished the last 2 years with injuries. Now, the style's interesting, right? Because I know T. Higgins is going to be probably the number 1 receiver out there. Like his size, like his production. I don't know if he's fast enough. Now, I know he's been too productive, so maybe I'm just, you know, nitpicking. But I like the idea of somebody with a lot of speed. And that's what they tried to get with Moore, but he's more quick than fast. Tried to get with Goodwin, but he's too small. Like, to be that, you know, the downfield threat. And Cooper's not super fast either, right? I mean, he can run away, he can get separation, but he's not a burner-type guy. And I know they're hard to come by, but I like that idea. I like the idea of somebody that can get deep for Deshaun Watson, create a lot of separation where not everything is a contested catch.
Yeah, the big body intrigues me just because if you think about DeAndre Hopkins, even a guy like Mike Williams at Clemson when he was there, you know, he's always had a guy that, and maybe it can be Njoku, a guy that you put it up and he's going to go get it.
Yeah, and right. So I'm not like slamming the door on Higgins. I just like my perfect thought is that room needs more speed, and they tried to address it last year and didn't quite get there. I think they'll try to do that again this year, and maybe that works in, you know, maybe Higgins plays faster than his time. Maybe they find another guy that is better than Goodwin, and then you have the complement you're looking for. But that just kind of is in the back of my head. They need to figure something out there.
You know, they drafted Tillman in the third round. Do you think they look early in the? You know, I think they have a second round this year. Would you? It wouldn't shock me because you got to get a guy. You know, as we mentioned, Cooper's getting up there in years. You got to find somebody to develop.
Yeah, to me, this position's really intriguing how it's going to play out. Right? We talked about Cooper's contract, so it's. I mean, I love Amari Cooper, and I think he's incredibly important to the Browns, and I would expect them to bring him back. But I don't think it's guaranteed given the contract. So, you know, do you draft a guy in the second round and go, okay, he's gonna come in and be my number two? Is that too much pressure for the guy? Or do you sign somebody in free agency, make a move with Cooper, and then draft somebody, right? And I guess maybe that's the same scenario, but you went out and upgraded number one, you figure. I just think there's a bunch of different ways it could play out, but I would not rule out a receiver there. I mean, you know, you can make the argument that they need to get younger depending on what they do in free agency.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram as well as BrownsZone.com. As always, Scott, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. BrownsZone.com on the internet. Also, the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram in print. Always really good Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dog Podcast Network, 216, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in one. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I now understand why Kevin Stefanski hired Ken Dorsey in the first place. Leslie Frazier, who would previously had Kevin Stefanski on his staff, came out and he did back up Ken Dorsey after the firing. So there's a connection between the Frazier, Dorsey, and Stefanski, and hopefully the offenses can come together. But I like this hire. I really, really do.
Always appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tyler Johnson, Faithful Dogs Podcast Network 216. Tyler, so it seems like more people are not happy with Ken Dorsey than are happy with Ken Dorsey, but we are starting to get some reaction that is positive. Just your thoughts about Ken Dorsey.
Yeah, Dave. So, I mean, when you look at the hiring of Ken Dorsey and why fans are kind of unhappy with this move, the first thing they talk about is, well, if he is such a good play caller and his offensive numbers are so good, well, why did Buffalo fire him? That's really the biggest thing that people are going to. And it sounds like it really came down to Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback, was leading the NFL in turnovers. That's really what I mean. He had 11 interceptions when the Bills. When the Bills fired Ken Dorsey. But under Ken Dorsey, the offense ranked second in expected points added per play and successful play percentage. They ranked third in yards per play at 6. Their touchdown drive percentage was 29.8%, and no team generated a more positive EPA on a greater percentage of their offensive plays. I mean, Ken Dorsey, you look at the numbers with the Bills, he was very successful. He's had success where he's been, not only with the Bills. He was Josh Allen's quarterback coach before he became the offensive coordinator, which is something really important to take a note at, because Josh Allen, when Ken Dorsey became the quarterback coach, really took off as a player. So there could be some correlation there. But also, even going back to Cam Newton, Carolina, Cam Newton had his MVP season under Ken Dorsey when Ken Dorsey was his quarterback coach. So he's got a ton of experience, brings a lot of experience, and I think it's a great hire. Whether he calls plays or not, we still don't know. But what the Browns want to do is evolve the offense. That's what this hire does, because Ken Dorsey succeeded with Josh Allen, and Josh Allen's put up great numbers. Cam Newton has, even though, again, that was his quarterback coach. Ken Dorsey's well-respected around the league and by players. This is a great hire. I know fans are a little worried about it or not very happy about it because you're getting someone that was fired mid-season. But when you dig deeper into this, Ken Dorsey's a pretty good pickup by the Browns.
So the other thing that you point out, Browns now have 4 offensive coaches that have play-calling experience. You got Kevin Stefanski, Ken Dorsey, Tommy Rees, who they hired, tight ends coach. We'll see what else he has. He called plays at Alabama and Notre Dame in the college ranks, and Chad O'Shea. So what that tells you is they've got a lot of different guys with input into what will be an evolving offense.
Exactly. And even Bill Callahan, I didn't mention Bill Callahan on this list. I mean, Bill Callahan hasn't called in offensive plays in a very long time, but he has that experience too. So you have young offensive minds a part of your coaching staff. Kevin Stefanski, of course, Ken Dorsey. Tommy Rees is a very underrated addition from no one expected this move, first off. He's got a ton of experience already at a very young age. And you're bringing someone that has experience running RPOs, using mobile quarterbacks from Alabama. Ken Dorsey, of course, has the experience with Josh Allen. So he's used to RPOs, mobility. That's exactly what you're looking for as you're trying to evolve this offense to better suit Deshaun Watson. Because there's no doubt when Alex Van Pelt was let go and some of the other offensive coaches, I don't think it's because they did a bad job or anything along those lines. I think it's just they wanted different voices. They needed this offense to evolve to more accommodate Deshaun Watson's skill set. That's what you're bringing in with Ken Dorsey and Tommy Rees. So I think it's a great move by Kevin Stefanski. And what he's realizing is this offense, the Browns don't do a lot of motion. I expect them to be in the middle or even upper echelon next year in the amount of motion, pre-snap motion that they're going to show, because that's where the NFL is right now. And the Browns need to incorporate that more. And I think these additions are going to help Kevin Stefanski, and even if Ken Dorsey ends up calling plays, it's going to help them build a good game plan that's better suited for Deshaun Watson in that shotgun-based type offense.
Yeah, the Browns were second least amount of motion in the NFL. The least was the Eagles. All right, before we go to break, this from NFL.com. Biggest needs for each team this offseason. For the Browns, they go with defensive tackle, linebacker, edge, wide receiver, and offensive tackle. Tyler, when you look at that, yeah, you can make the case linebacker. The Browns don't traditionally put a lot of emphasis on that. You've got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Diabate was on the practice squad. We'll see what they do with, I would expect either Taki or Anthony Walker to be back. And I think the wide receiver, I think that should be moved up a little bit. They need some wide receiver help.
No, I completely agree with that, Dave. Wide receiver, to me, I could make the argument wide receiver should be their biggest need, because I think at defensive tackle, I think you can bring back a guy like Shelby Harris on a one-year deal, because I think Shelby Harris is at that age where if you offer him, I mean, even just somewhat of a decent payday for a one-year contract, I think he stays. You have Dalvin Tomlinson already. Siaki Ika is going to play a bigger role. And then is it Maurice Hurst, Jordan Elliott? I think Maurice Hurst, because I think you can get him on a cheaper one-year deal. And he did some nice things before he got injured. But they'll probably also draft a D-tackle. Linebacker, they might pay JOK. If they do that, then, yeah, I mean, you're not spending much on free agency at linebacker. Offensive tackle, you have DeJuan Jones as, I mean, we don't know if he's going to be a starter or backup depending on what happens with Conklin. But receiver, you need 2 wide receivers in that room next year. Either one in free agency, one in the draft, or one in free agency, one in trade. And I expect Andrew Berry to add at least 2 wide receivers to make an impact next year.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the whole message of the offseason appears to be we got to get Deshaun Watson. We got to unlock him. You got to give him some. You got to give him some weapons on offense, without question. I agree with you. Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dog Podcast Network 216 and I going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll talk free agent targets. We also have a hypothetical trade. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
You might have expected all the games and all the excitement. And even though you couldn't see it right away, it's all right here. 5 games in 1. $22 million in prizes between $25 and $500, and a shot at $1 million grand prize. Golden Casino, a night's worth of excitement for just $10.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE with Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dog Podcast, as well as Network 216. So, Tyler, who are some of the free agents you think Andrew Berry might be targeting in this offseason?
I know it's been reported because it was mentioned on Deshaun Watson's podcast with Quincy Avery. I do think they are going to try and go after T. Higgins. I think that's going to be a very expensive move, and we also don't know if Cincinnati's going to franchise tag him. I think they're going to go big hunting at wide receiver. I think another guy that stands out to me is Mike Williams from the Chargers, depending on if Jim Harbaugh and the new front office in LA decides they want to keep him or not. He's been injury prone, but I'll tell you what, he's got previous successful chemistry with Deshaun Watson and Clemson. Wide receiver sticks out to me more than anything else. They do need speed at the position. Calvin Ridley, I would stay away from Gabe Davis personally, but that's just me. But then Hollywood Brown is an interesting name from the Cardinals. He had a little bit of a down year. Obviously, the Cardinals had a revolving door at quarterback until Kyler Murray came back. But that's a name that really sticks out to me. And then if you're looking at defensive tackle, if they do want to end up spending a little bit more there, DJ Reader is going to be a free agent from Cincinnati. I think he ends up back in Cincinnati, but a guy like Fletcher Cox on a one-year deal would make a lot of sense. Now, recently the Browns added the Texans' former defensive line coach. I think that could be an option for Sheldon Rankins. Sheldon Rankins was a free agent last year. He was on a one-year deal with Houston, but he also is going to be a free agent this offseason. So if they want to spend a little bit more, because, again, I think Sheldon Rankins probably is about in the $6 to $8 million a year range. If they want to go that route, that would make a lot of sense. So I think defensive tackle and wide receiver are the areas that Andrew Berry is going to look at addressing the most.
Yeah, the thing, remember now, with Ken Dorsey, he played, Gabe Davis played for him, so we'll see if that factors into it as well. Hypothetical trades for every NFL team. This is from the Bleacher Report. For the Browns, they have the Browns sending a 2024 fifth-round pick, 2025 fifth-round pick, for Brandon Cooks, and they point out some of Cooks' best work came in Houston, 2020. I'm not dismissing it, but I think they want younger. Cooks would be kind of it's not a fair comparison, but Maurice Goodwin, an older guy. Mm-hmm. I don't think if you're going to do that, go get somebody on a one-year deal. I don't think you need to give up the draft capital to go get a guy like Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Dave. I mean, nothing against Brandon Cooks. I mean, he's always been productive where he's gone. But his year in Dallas, and we saw how, Dak Prescott was throwing the ball all over the place. And Brandon Cooks only had 657 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns, and I believe he played in every game this year. So he wasn't featured that much in the offense, and he was supposed to be their number 2 receiver. Well, he didn't really get the ball that much. We don't know if that's why exactly, but the fact he's going to be going into 31 years old, I probably would pass on that. And again, there is value to be found in free agency, I think, because if you look at this draft class coming up, this draft class is absolutely stacked. I mean, when you're talking talent at receiver. So maybe this has an effect on the market and free agency, and you're able to get some of these guys that might end up taking a little bit less money on a 1 or 2 year deal in hopes that maybe the class in 2025, that receiver class isn't as good, or even 2026. I think that's what's at play here a little bit. Like, there are guys in free agency I think you can find at value. I know DJ Chark, that was someone that the Browns, Mary Kay Cabot, I remember reporting last year, the Browns expressed some interest in. He's another guy that's going to be a free agent. He's still only 27 years old. So, and he dealt with Carolina was just a mess all year. But there are guys like that could be available that I think you could find at a cheap rate. I mean, McCole Hardman, he's a speedster. He's only going to be 26. You could probably get him very, very cheap. Like, there are guys that are going to be available that I personally wouldn't spend the draft capital on him either. If I was going to go after someone, like I said, it would be Mike Williams, because I think you can get him for a 4th or 5th round pick. But also the big thing that sticks out to me is that he is a bigger body receiver. And not only that, he is a vertical threat. I think what they need is a guy that is a big body, but can also stretch the defense. And even though Mike Williams has his injury history, because he does, when he has been healthy, he has been one of the best at contested catches in the league. He's been a deep threat. I mean, we saw what he's done with Justin Herbert. I mean, when he's healthy, the guy is fantastic. I think he could be that for Deshaun Watson once again. And they have chemistry from playing together at Clemson. He's younger. He's about 3 years younger than Brandon Cooks. I think that would make the most sense. But, yeah, I think the Brandon Cooks train has sailed.
All right. Before I let you go, let's take a look. This is a 2024 mock draft from draftwire.com. We're going to look at a couple of them from the Browns. Second round, they have them taking a wide receiver from South Carolina, Xavier Legette. Big frame, 6'3", 227, serves him well on a target, comeback route, crossers over the middle, as well as red zone. What do you think about Legette as a potential second-round pick? And I believe he's a guy that'll be in Mobile at the Senior Bowl coming up this week, too.
Yeah, I think this would be a really good pick for the Browns, and I really want to see what he does at the Senior Bowl. I mean, this level of production coming from the SEC, we saw that they like Cedric Tillman, and I still think the Browns do. But, again, another big body receiver like this, nearly 1,300 yards receiving at South Carolina, a mid-tier SEC program, 7 touchdowns. I'd be all for this pick. I do think that they are going to take a receiver early in this draft, and I think you have to, because there's going to be some really good talent available. I mean, all the Washington receivers, like the guy that sticks out to me, he's smaller, but if a guy like Jalen Polk from Washington is there, even Jalen McMillan from Washington, there's a good group of receivers that could be available on day 2. I'm curious on Troy Franklin from Oregon. I think he's going to end up testing at the end of round 1, but he's a guy that if he's there on day 2, I mean, he brings speed, he brings size. That to me would be the ideal, like the seamless fit for the Browns. But again, I don't know if he's going to get there. I'd be more than okay with Xavier Legette.
Yeah, I'm with you. It'll be interesting to see. And I like the fact, I agree with you, big body that can run and stretch the defense. That just adds the dimension Browns need to help out Deshaun Watson. Tyler Johnson, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tyler.
My pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
Tyler Johnson, make sure you check him out. Faithful Dogs podcast, as well as Network 216. Always really good Browns coverage. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.